To the Night Owl session. Congratulations. Darkness or dawn is the theme. Prince Harry was going with the dawn theme. Tonight we are examining darkness. Okay, that's what we're here to discuss. That's what everybody has been asked to discuss, just to be clear. That's what we're doing. Let me introduce the panel first. We have an incredible panel. First of all, Garry Kasparov, if we can get him up on the big screen so everybody can see. We're delighted. As you know, Garry Kasparov is a Russian dissident and chair of the Renew Democracy Initiative. He's joining us there live. We have James Sherr from the International Centre for Defence and Security based in Estonia over there. We've got Morgan McSweeney, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister of the UK until very recently, from 2024 to 2026. His first public appearance since that role ended. I can see members of the international media here as well. We have David Behar, Deputy Director of the Centre for Analysis, Planning and Strategy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France. Thank you for joining us. Iulian, Chifu, President of the Bucharest Centre for Conflict Prevention and Early Warning. Meurmishvili, Editor-in-Chief of the Independence Avenue Media. Lovely to have you too. Brian Whitmore. There you are, Brian. Thank you. Non-resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, founder and author of the Power Vertical blog and host of the Power Vertical podcast, both of which focus on Russian affairs. A little bit of a round of applause for your panel. Hoping I hadn't left anybody out there. It's a big panel, which means that I'm going to keep you to time, just like we did with those big defense chiefs at lunchtime. So 2 minutes each for 3 questions. That's what we seem to get through at lunchtime, and I'm going to give you the 3 main questions. Of course, the conversations might go in different directions, and we will embrace that when it happens. The 3 questions are, and Garry, I hope you can hear this, we're going to break this into 3 questions. The first is, are we already losing the rules-based order? Are we at rupture point? Is it already broken? The second question will be, where is the world already darker and threatening us? And then at the end, can it be stopped? I was going for a walk with a security source who may be in the audience right now. Yesterday we were passing the tanks and the drones, and this person turns to me and said, it feels like it's 1938. Garry Kasparov, are we already losing the rules-based order? Are we at rupture point?
No, we're not losing. We lost it already.
And now we can't hear you, Garry. So, yes, we can now. So, Garry, start your answer.
No, we're not losing. We lost it already. It's done. So we just have to recognize that the old pillars of the world that we used to live in, they've gone. So they technically exist like United Nations, NATO, but they're not functioning. They are not performing. So we just have to recognize this truth, and also recognize that Donald Trump is kind of a bulldozer that is destroying whatever it's working or doesn't work. And we have to start looking for new arrangements. And Ukrainian war is offering us new opportunities, new solutions. And hopefully that European Union is showing signs of life and ability to reform and adequately respond to the challenges. But this year 2026, I believe it's a year of the transition. And by the end of the year, we'll see the framework of the new arrangements, both on security and on geopolitical cooperation.
Okay, Brian Whitmore.
There we go. No, thank you. The short answer is it's dying, but it's not dead. And a lot of this is rooted in domestic politics, as much as it is in international affairs. I mean, one of the curious aspects of the current situation is the degree to which my training and skills as an analyst of Russian politics has become useful in understanding politics in my own country, which is supposed to be the pillar of the rules-based international order. And if this suggests that the United States is actually becoming more similar to Russia, more corrupt, more clannish, more oligarchical, more arbitrary in how it's ruled, this speaks volumes about how dark the situation we find ourselves in now, and that is reflected in the crisis of the international order. I mean, the crisis we're in now, it has its roots in 2 separate but related struggles. One's a struggle for domestic governance between liberal democracy, which finds itself in crisis right now, and on the other hand, a kleptocratic authoritarianism that I call gangsterism as governance. This is related also to a struggle for the international order between a crisis-ridden, rules-based order and the potential emergence of a system based on spheres of influence, in which, to quote Thucydides, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. So that's where we are. I'm glad to elaborate on these in future interventions.
Yeah.
I'm going to just use two quotes instead of going into, maybe I will elaborate a little further down the road, but two quotes are, I urge you to beware of the temptation to remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong, good and evil. That was President Reagan. And there was another quote a couple decades before that, which was, if you're going through hell, keep going. So we are going through hell right now. I agree with Gary's more of an optimistic view, which is where we have this opportunity now, we need to take advantage of it. So I believe that this community, like-minded people, are able to take advantage of this. And the rules-based order is not dead. We need to just make sure that it survives.
David.
In terms of describing the state of today's world order, I think we had in recent months two interesting descriptions of it by two heads of state. One was Mark Carney at Davos, who was basically saying that we should stop pretending that the rules-based order is still working, and this is this idea of a rupture. And then there is the idea that was laid down by the Finnish President Alexander Stubb in Foreign Affairs, which is the idea of a transition, that we should transition to a system, an international world order that should be more representative. But I think both agree, and we all do, that we are in a pivotal moment and that we have to adapt to this new reality where the gatekeepers of the system don't consider that it is in their interest anymore to protect the system that they agreed upon 70 years ago. Now, you had US guarantees that allowed the whole middle class of the international order to prosper despite existential threats. And now, with this return of spheres of influence that we've mentioned, there is a very large group of states who are directly threatened. And this is also an opportunity to build new coalitions.
Morgan.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here this evening. It's such an honor to be in Kyiv. This is my first public event since leaving Downing Street, and there's no place I'd rather begin. And that is because in the darkest of times, this country gave the world something very precious, which was hope. Because when everyone thought that collapse would happen, Ukraine stood. When cynics said democracy would fail, Ukraine showed courage. When lesser men would have fled, your president stayed. I think we are in a new era, in a very different era. I don't know when it began, but I always think that the old era ended in the financial crisis. And in this era of volatility and uncertainty and insecurity, we cannot even take democracy for granted. So this here now feels like a frontier to our future. There are so many things about this era that I think are baked in, like volatility, speed of change. But that isn't and shouldn't be to be despairing about the era we're in. Understanding the world we're in is not accepting the world we're in. We have agency to try and drive change. I think in democracies, the growth of populist right isn't what's shaping this new era. I think it's feeding on people's insecurities. I think it destroys institutions. I don't think it provides answers. I think what's driving the era is the insecurity of ordinary people. And I think what good governments must do is to shape the era in their interest. And I think there are things that allies can do with Ukraine to help everyone. First, learning not just by observing, learning by working with. This is a country that is reshaping how states work at speed, reimagining warfare. Some of the things I'm hearing today are just incredible. I think the second thing is that allies should be a stronger voice for a stronger and more united Europe. I think thirdly is that allies should work with Ukraine in defending institutions, because the answer to the era is not to accept defeat, but for free peoples everywhere to stand together and face down that darkness.
Thank you. Iulian.
Thank you. So, first, I'm not in the guessing business. Actually, we are doing prospective studies, and I will recommend it's last year's research on tomorrow's world, how it will look. We are calling this the post-transitional world order. Second, it is, and it's not a game. It's what I can tell you about the book is that the darkest scenarios are also the less probable ones. And yes, we are preparing for some. In some cases, we don't have the resources, neither the capacity to face or to cope with such scenarios, if ever they are happening. But in this sense, what we are seeing is the fact that we have status quo, or if you want, more inclined to adaptation of the international system. And yes, we have Europe, and look, it's still alive and kicking. They are still making free trade agreements. They are still discussing about helping democratic changes in some parts of the world, or transferring norms, European norms, to third states via those types of agreement. And we have three revisionist groups, if you want, or poles. One, unfortunately, in Washington. And all those poles have their different, scenarios. The most important one are destroying what is of the world, and we will see how it is going to be rebuilt. And yes, there are three ways. We have Washington, we have Beijing. You know the proposal of the Congress of Xi Jinping, the future of the world. We are granting peace. You have to give up your liberties and human rights, because that's what makes conflicts and things happen. So, and we can grant a certain level of prosperity. And for those who are behaving and are part of the system and are getting good grades into their system of notes, being close to the system, maybe they will also have an access to some resources, to some position. And we have Russia, which has on some stage more reserved role. They want a veto for everything that means security in Europe, and the Americans out, if possible, yesterday. And at the global level, they would like to come back to a bipolar world where everything that is discussed should be discussed with them. And in any case, and here they are missing somehow, they are converging with Trump. They should have an advantage on negotiating anything at the border. So we have three types of revisionism and a type of status quo, but think of them. One part is moving to adapting the system, and the other one are about destroying the system and remaking the way that they would like it to be. So I don't have a straight answer to your question, but in any case, I'm less pessimistic than the usual. If you take, you have quoted Davos, I can go to Munich conference. Every leader coming was saying, the world is changing and we are never going to be back to what we had. Okay, if you go that way, for sure this will happen.
Okay, a great array of answers there. Garry, I can see you're shaking your head. We'll come to you in a moment. You've obviously thought that the rules-based order is out. There are others who think that we're defining the wrong thing. Others think that Ukraine shows the way. Some people thinking that we're in a transition period and we're not quite sure where we're going to end up with. So let's discuss the darkness that exists in the world right now. Garry, we'll go back to you. Where is the world already darker, and where is it threatening us? I know you said that NATO doesn't work with Trump in the White House.
No, I had said NATO dead. There's a different story. Because NATO was unable to fulfill its only function, to stop Russian aggression against free Europe. That's it. And the problem is that Ukraine now is paying enormous price in blood, is that because there was no courage to recognize that the international order had to be proclaimed dead in February 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. That's it. It's everybody who wants to play, some kind of find middle ground, Let's, play with words. It's over. It's dead. I mean, it's just, why are we wasting our time? It's a transition period. It's a nice word, but it's Ukraine. Thanks to Ukraine, Russian tanks are not crossing the NATO border. And we all know that. So whether it's darker, yeah, we live in a dark time, but that's, it's history. So every time when the international relations between countries were not up to keep the balance, going all the way back to the 30-year war, so it ended up with wars, with military conflict that could last 30 years, 20 years, and it eventually ended with kind of an arrangement like 1648 Westphal Peace or 1713, the arrangements after a war for Spanish succession, or 1815 Vienna Congress. Or League of Nations. League of Nations, typical example. Total failure. Unwillingness to recognize it led to the World War II. United Nations, it did work until 1991. It prevented a nuclear Armageddon. But then it wasn't functioning.
Garry, what would the world look like then if Russia won?
Right. Thanks God, we're not dealing with this question. Though the West was willing to sacrifice Ukraine, should we spend time debating how the West was preparing to sacrifice Ukraine to Putin? So all these negotiations with the Biden administration, Stoltenberg even just recognized that. And again, Ukrainian heroism and Zelensky leadership, that's what saved the free world and, of course, saved Ukraine. So Russia is not going to win, but Ukraine paid enormous price. But now we have to think how we rebuild the world to make sure that this endless battle between freedom and tyranny will end up in our favor. So, and I don't think it's a dark time today, because at least we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And again, it's enormous contribution by Ukraine, and Europe now is waking up. And as for America, okay, it's a long story. I live there, so I can give a lecture on American politics. So I know it, from top to bottom. And it's easy to blame Trump. But Obama, 2014, so American guarantees for Ukraine in 1994. So that's the end of the world. That's how the world is collapsing, where the certain things that were, like foundational stones, America's signature. And then all of a sudden, Putin realized it's all just, it's all about, raising stakes, and they always follow the cards, no matter how strong the deck is.
James, I'm terribly sorry. I don't think I came to you for the first question.
No, you didn't.
So, James, are we already losing? There's no rules-based order on this panel. I've already lost it. So first of all, apologies. Just wanted to exhibit how the rules-based order breaks down. So the question is, James, we're going to take you back one step. Are we already losing the rules-based order, or are we at rupture point already?
Mark, you're a very experienced and competent moderator, and I am an experienced and competent panelist. Let me answer your question by inverting it, and I will simply make 2 points. First, if we don't want darkness to prevail, we must lose our fear of the dark. We need to accept its reality and its permanence, and we need to accept that it is not the prelude to dawn. In theological terms, as you have already mentioned, we need to accept that there is evil in the world, and that conciliation, compromise, and patience will not change it. What we can do is prevent the darkness from spreading. To that end, it is not enough to counter threat with robust resistance. We need to demonstrate to an aggressor that aggression will have ruinous consequences to him. Second point, evil has weaknesses. No one can seriously argue today that Russia is winning in Ukraine. We can still argue about whether it is losing, but the bigger point is that Russia is rotting. It is like a mythical creature that derives nutrition by devouring others, and as it loses the ability to do that, it derives sustenance by eating itself. The Russian economy today is slowly devouring itself. It's a universe of value-subtracting activity, and its military system and military strategy rest on bribery, coercion, and terror, and nothing more. What Ukraine has developed in the midst of all of this is capacity. It is not only a capable but a leading military power. It is not only an innovator, it is redefining the nature of warfare. It is becoming a security provider to Europe, even to Saudi Arabia, and as Europe recognizes this, Europe will become stronger.
Where is the darkness spreading, James? You mentioned it. Where is it? Where would you like to highlight and flag that the darkness is spreading right now? Which corners of the earth?
It's there. In Russia, it is marinating and mutating. We rightly I celebrate the departure of Orban. We now are discovering what was known for decades now, that Bulgaria is mired in corruption, that, in the midst of all this, and I'm sorry to be reinforcing, I'm always the pessimist on every panel. Here I'm not. I'm sorry to be reinforcing the optimists. There is what we can call a group of resolute and purposeful states in Europe who understand what they are dealing with and understand how to deal with it, and the rest of Europe is not quite with them, and won't be. But that should not deter us at all. One of my favorite comment that sheds light on all of this that we need to keep in front of us is the dictum of Thomas Carlyle. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? Those who understand must act. And there is a part of Europe that understands that. And the rest do not, and that is their problem, and in the end it will become their shame, not ours.
James, how tough is life getting in Estonia?
It isn't. We've always known we're a frontline country. We have conscription. People are absolutely reconciled to that. There's no visible discontent. The notion that you can do anything with little green men in Estonia is a fantasy. And the notion that you can fight a limited war there is very dubious. The Estonian policy is, while they are meeting in Brussels and talking in Brussels and talking in Washington, we are fighting. The policy set out very clearly by the head of the British Brigade in Estonia is, I am a subordinate of the Estonian divisional commander. When he starts fighting, I start fighting. I don't pick up phones and talk to national capitals. Canadian forces in Latvia have the same policy. So we have to build on that. If you want light to prevail, you have to strengthen the light where it is. It is not our task to change Russia. We have to ensure that whatever happens in Russia, they will not be able to subvert and damage others. And we can do that.
Yeah. Disinformation, AI, out of control, not regulated, social media, it's making us all addicted to all sorts of things and algorithms. Surely that's part of the problem.
I'll say it again. Absolutely, yes. That's a big problem. Authoritarians thrive. As James said, darkness. Actually, I also had sort of that quote in mind. Not quote, but a soundbite in mind. Darkness prevails when facts are absent. And that's exactly what's happening with disinformation. Authoritarians eating our lunch, a few times a day, every day. They're spending a lot of money, more than we do as democracies. We don't understand the narratives, we don't understand the messaging. They do. And they take the space which is created by this darkness. I see this whole darkness concept as a vacuum where there are no facts. There is no explanation of what's happening in the world for the people that are fighting for choices. And Georgia is not quite the dark place. Like, I will pick up on the question that you asked of James. But there are attempts to turn Georgia.
Estonia, yeah.
No, I'm talking about Georgia.
Yeah.
So you asked James, so where is the dark place?
Yes.
So I think we have shades of dark in multiple different places. And Georgia is one of those places today where they're attempting to turn Georgia into darkness. But by providing facts to the population, by being present in that space where, again, facts and truth is presented to the population, so they have a choice. When people have facts and truth, they make different choices than people do in the authoritarian countries. So we need to continue fighting this fight. Today, the battlefield or the fight, the battle between darkness and light is not only on Ukrainian front lines. It is on the Ukrainian front lines, but not only. It also goes through the information space, and it's also informational, and we need to push back, and we need to fight in that space, and we all need to remember that.
David, Iaz talking about Georgia. There's a battle going on in Georgia. What about in France? Where will the national rally Jordan Bardella lead? How does it reflect what's going on inside Europe?
So my big part of my job is to write scenarios for my minister who will prevent him from sleeping at night. So we've been drafting such scenarios for years. I guess the difference today is that many of these scenarios have already come to reality more than usual. One of the things, and this is related to your question, is the fact that we have a lot less democracies in the world that we had a few years ago, and there are more and more authoritarian regimes. There is one scenario of having one day an EU ran by a majority of radical right leaders, and this would clearly be, in my view, a dark scenario. If you look at also scenarios unfolding, I wanted to mention also the climate issues, because this weighs a lot in the minds of public opinions, and the fact that we are approaching the climate tipping points, the fact that superpowers and regional powers in general have found ways of weaponizing interdependencies, and the fact that they're using all the choke points that they can have, that they can use, and all the leverage they can use to play on the other's weaknesses, and using also asymmetric means and striking, including civilian infrastructures. So in the framework that we had for warfare, for example, is crumbling before our eyes. And so part of this darker picture is also for us Europeans to relearn to cope with the figure of the enemy, which, I mean, the figure of the enemy is something that us Europeans had forgotten somehow. Some Europeans for fear of themselves, some Europeans because it was more convenient to live without an enemy. And this process of relearning who your enemy is and look at the enemy in the eye is part of the process of getting out of these darkest times.
That's quite a bucket list, Iulian. In terms of early warning, conflict prevention, how do you handle the big crises that are in these letters that keep this gentleman's minister awake at night?
Well, in my former positions, working with a president and with a prime minister, I had to deal with the crisis and the conflict, so I was Mr. Conflict, so all the conflicts came into my plate. That doesn't change the things. The thing that I had to teach decision makers is you have to split your activity in three. A third, you should deal with the crises, which are all over and are coming all the time. A third, you are doing the current affairs because the country need to go ahead. And a third, you need to build something. If you don't build something, you can kiss goodbye or perspective of being re-elected, reproduce, or continuing and let something behind you which is meaningful. In this sense, actually, I don't want to completely converge. I'm quite sure that none of the people in the panel read actually this book, but the conclusions are free, and you are going to see that they are the same. The first conclusion is that technology is a multiplier, and it's going to play a more and more important role, but it's not going to be a panacea. Second is that we have the enemy within. And so the dark, if you want to keep the concept that the organizers have used and James has used, the problem is we are dealing with the dark inside our societies that are very easy to react to the impulses of the dark coming from outside. Actually, the war moved to a full spectrum warfare, and a number of instruments of the future aggression is already on the ground in each and every of our states. And I don't want also to lose the question about, in that case, Romania. We've seen it in the hardest way possible when somebody attempted to abduct the most important position in our state, like overnight, in 10 days. From zip to number one in the elections as president of the republic. And guess what? Democracy does not have a break. You can't hit the brake and remake the whole thing. So that leads you to a complicated way, because all these things that are coming from beneath and from us, if they are not preventing, they are going at some point to blow up if you don't pay attention. And the third point into that, I will end with that, is that a change, a dramatic change, a tectonic change from one world order to the next can be done only by war. And I mean kinetic world war, okay, with all the component that a war means in the 21st century.
Brian, we've been discussing and hinting at lots of wider things. I was speaking to Ruben Gallego, the senator from Arizona, earlier, and he said, for the number of reasons, Donald Trump's going to throw many more things our way, the world's way, over the next few weeks, few months. It's going to get out of control. I know you analyze this closely. What are we to make of that gentleman?
Well, I mean, we don't know what we could expect from President Trump. Mark, I'm just going to pick up from my first intervention from where I was at. And the good news is it kind of riffs off a lot of what some of the other panelists were saying. I agree with Garry that we're in a transition. It just ain't clear yet a transition to what. And I agree with James when he says that we are in a dark period and the dawn doesn't always follow the darkness, but it could. It depends on us. Everything's contingent. Nothing in history is predetermined. We are in a new version of the Cold War, but it's nothing like the old Cold War. Nothing like the old Cold War. If the old Cold War was fought between states, the new Cold War is being fought within states, within every state. And our American president right now is one manifestation of that. What's going on in Georgia is another manifestation of that. The fears of the Rally Party in France is another manifestation of that. What we have, like the Cold War, is a normative struggle. A normative struggle between liberal democracy, which stresses, of course, civic patriotism and individual rights and accountability and transparency and respect for institutions and the rule of law. But on the other side, there's an alternative fighting for dominance right now. I call this gangsterism as governance. It's based on arbitrary, unaccountable, and personalized rule, institutionalized corruption, patron-client relationships, the merger of money and power, the subordination of the law to money and power. In essence, it's an unaccountable, non-transparent, autocratic, and arbitrary form of government, and it's deeply rooted in Russian political culture. But what's happening now is it is transcending Russian political culture. It's coming to a lot of our shores. And this is where we are. And this gangsterism has exploited the fact that in the 21st century, Western liberal democracy is experiencing its most acute crisis of confidence in generations. A series of shocks from 9/11 to the Iraq War to the financial crisis, the migrant crisis, the pandemic, all these have fed this angst that's being fed on by gangsterism, right? The proponents of gangsterism have leveraged all of this by claiming to be the champions of a new order that will replace liberal democracy. It stresses ethno-nationalism, so-called traditional values, and it promises the return of a golden age. It's exploiting anxiety about globalization, about economics, about demographic change. A longtime Kremlin official, Vladislav Surkov, recently wrote that Russia isn't just interfering in Western elections, it's interfering in Western brains. So that's where we are right now. We're in a situation where every election in any of our countries is a potential crisis. And believe me, I know I came here from Washington. But guess what? This show could be coming to a capital near you. Berlin, London, Paris. It's easily seeable. But there is a way out. If I have time, I could talk about the way out. But
yes, we will, and we're going to it.
Okay.
We will fit it in. And you mentioned London, the financial crisis. Morgan, you were talking about the financial crisis. Obviously, you've had access to and had to think through these scenarios and seen the effects of these things, probably more secretive documents than we've all had access to. You know, where do you think the darkness lies in the world at the moment?
I agree with pretty much what everyone said about the pressure is everywhere. I think that the aftermath of the global financial crisis has brought enormous darkness for a lot of ordinary people in the UK. One of the most dismissive things that I think the media sometimes say about voters is that they don't have patience. It's not patience they lack, it's time. They've had almost 20 years of a financial crisis putting pressure on their lives, making them not only worse off, but worry that they're going to be worse off forever and ever, and their children are going to be worse off than them. And that is a darkness. And when you see things happening like the recklessness of the Iran war now, you know who's going to pay the price for that. So I know now that in London, Keir and his ministers will be working extremely hard to alleviate that. So I think that pressure is everywhere. I think the kind of darkness that's here is different and much darker because of what the Russians have done. Kyiv is such an amazing and beautiful city. And when you walk about it, it feels like you're walking around a modern European city where spring is coming to life and people are living very normal lives. But every now and then, and I've only been here for a couple of days, you just see in the cracks a darkness that really gets to your soul. Like just seeing a little girl put flowers on a picture in Independence Square, or a family car with bullet holes on the side of it as you walk past St. Michael's Cathedral, because the darkness that's represented by that is a darkness that is not just about invasion, it's psychological. It's a darkness that says power is unlimited, that human beings can be killed with impunity, and that lies can bury truth. And that's where technology and social media are important, because it can play a very malign role in division and lies and misinformation. Worse than that, I think it's capable of crushing the spirits of young people. That's not to say that the response to that needs to be Luddism, but it is to use it, to regulate it in a proper way and use it in the most effective way, so that we can help people to break out of the zero-sum mindset that is causing a lot of this.
Now, Morgan, darkness is blighting a little bit of British politics at the moment, and you very kindly agreed to take a couple of of questions on this. It's the Prince of Darkness that we're talking about. It fits perfectly into our theme. If you don't know who the Prince of Darkness is, it's Peter Mandelson, who was sacked as the UK ambassador to the US in September. His shadow is casting over British politics. And the picture that's being drawn about yourself, and you've never spoken about this before, on the front pages of many of the newspapers this week and a lot of chatter in Westminster, is that you're a protege of the Prince of Darkness, and you bullied the civil service into giving him the job. We've heard the F word that you apparently used, shouting at people, this idea that there was overwhelming pressure and you were part of that. How do you respond to this picture that has built up of you?
Thank you. I don't recognize that description of me. I'm not going to say too much about right now. I'm seeing the MPs next week, and I don't want to in any way disrespect their process. But I don't. I find it strange reading about a character with the same name as mine sometimes. But yeah, I don't recognize that character.
You don't recognize him. Do you regret sending Peter Mandelson to America without vetting him first?
Well, my role was to advise the Prime Minister, and I take responsibility in the advice that I gave and resigned, but that's all I can take responsibility for, the role that I played, and I think it's right to take responsibility when you get the call wrong.
Which you did in your resignation letter. That was the specific reason. Can you be more specific about what it was? Because that seems to be one of the issues. Why did you resign over it? What were you regretting?
The advice I gave was wrong.
And what was the advice?
That he should go to the US as ambassador.
And are you taking each other's calls at the moment? That's a no. Okay. So now we turn to whether it can be stopped, Garry. And I'm going to pick up on your idea, and I'm not talking about Downing Street anymore. That was just a bit of British politics that we had to fit in there. Russia's Taiwan, people have called it. This is your call to invite Russians in a very structured way out of the country, the brain drain effect. Is that how it can be stopped?
It's one of the tools to help Ukraine winning the war, because the war is always run on three components. First, manpower. Putin still has enough, though it's less than he wanted. We could see it's draining. Money. The supply is dwindling, but still, he has cash to pay for contractors. Today I read that in St. Petersburg, they pay $47,000 up front for anybody who signs a contract and goes to Ukraine to fight. So that tells you that he's quite desperate and he's afraid of mass mobilization. It's not going to work. That's probably good news. But the third component is brains. And this war is increasingly about brains. And this is the most precious but the most limited resource for Putin. He doesn't have millions. And we know that in 2022, at least 1 million Russians tried to run away, but they had to come back, mostly 75, 80%, because they ran out of their passports, documents. And Putin immediately made it clear, you want to renew your passport, go back to Russia. So the idea of what we call Russian Taiwan, just, as a metaphor, is first of all to help Russians who already left. And many of them are suffering, from this 20 packages of sanctions because the computer doesn't understand whether you're good Russian or bad Russian. So you have to deal with your legal travel documents and also with bank accounts. But also to attract many more that in Russia. And it also should help us to turn the table with Putin propaganda, which unfortunately succeeded convincing Russians it's a war against all Russians, not against Putin's regime. So creating this quasi-extraterritorial state that will offer Russians who are already outside and many who would like to leave, it will be a great help because it will drain Putin resources and also bring people in. By the way, anybody who signs our declaration, that's the new one we did in Strasbourg, becomes automatically criminal by 10 probably different counts of Russian criminal law. So there's no way back when you do it publicly. So it's one of the elements of fighting the war, but also hopefully one day So if Russia goes through this transition, which I believe possible only after Ukrainian total victory, there is nothing else that can kill Russian imperial virus but Ukrainian flag in Sevastopol. I said it many times. I can repeat it again. So if the moment comes, then this cadre of Russians, this is the Russian Taiwan, could become a factor. It's a cluster, a matrix that will help us to start rebuilding Russia, or several states that will appear on the remnants of Russian Empire. Because as long as Russian Empire exists, the war will not end. So it's very important for Europeans and also Americans to understand Putin is war. Russian economy is in war footing. The whole Russia is a giant war camp now. And without regime change, nothing will happen. But regime change possible only with Ukrainian total victory. So that's why we have to find all the ways, including creative ways that I'm discussing now, to make sure that Putin is defeated. And just one more point, just it's what I heard is, it's very important confession that the British troops in Estonia or Canadian brigade, which is I think mixed brigade, in Latvia, are now subordinate to local authorities, to local army command. That's the best illustration that NATO is dead, because technically they have to wait for the instruction from Brussels, but they understand they will never receive a call from American general who is in charge of NATO troops in Europe, because this general will call Donald Trump, and we know that Donald Trump will not be able to answer the call. So that's, again, this is good news. That's why I say we are not in a period of darkness, because we already realized that so many things do not work, and that's how you start winning the war. And thanks to Ukrainians, they bought us this time and also came up with some great creative ideas. So I wanted to make my own contribution with my colleagues of Forum of Free Russia and many others. So and to make sure that people from my country will be able to cut ties with Putin's criminal fascist regime and join forces to fight back.
Garry, thank you. James, you reacted.
In this diverting and interesting discussion, there's a point of historical perspective which has not been made. So allow me to make it. I could embellish it, but I won't.
You can make it just briefly.
Very briefly. It has been a basic principle of Soviet and Russian military art, refurbished to the present, that you cannot win a war unless you are also present in the enemy's rear. Lenin himself said, "Who but a fool would believe we could have won the Civil War without our allies in the white camp?" This is the strategy we are dealing with. Why does it have to be presented as something new? Why do people refuse to recognize it? Find 1,000 pages of text on the subject and lots of practice and illustrations. I'm talking too long, but that's what I wanted.
Thank you.
And last thing also, there is a book I would commend that was written in about 1980 by the Hungarian historian Georg Lukács, called The Last European War, 1939 to 41, before the United States and the Soviet Union entered. And it is in many ways similar to what we are talking about, because it is talking about internecine strife in Europe that define this whole reality. That's all.
Morgan, it's very constraining when you're inside number 10. You've got a lot of bureaucracy. Now that you're out, you were to set up a think tank. You could solve whatever problem you thought was the most important to fix this in the world. Where would you focus the efforts from all that you know, from all the problems that are stuck in the world?
That's a great question.
Let's start at home.
He just gave you a business idea. How's that?
So I think facing up to the challenges that are just unavoidable, aging demographics is a big one, I think, in the UK. So I think by the next decade, a quarter of the population will be over the age of 65. So how do you shape the tax system, place of work, healthcare system around that? Secondly is how you prepare a country for the transition that AI is going to bring, so that it's not imposed by either tech companies or authoritarian regimes, but actually helps everyone to understand how it works how it can benefit people and maybe help towards some of the problems the first challenge brings. And third is that how you can take this moment to strengthen unity with allies, take this moment to make the changes to the state that are going to be required to prevent war in the future.
David, I saw you nodding along there.
I was thinking. I guess the question is, how do we get back from this darkness and
yes,
find
absolutely.
a bit of light? And I was thinking also about my own ideas, and I think it lies also, and I think this is an important point to make, including in relationship related to Ukraine and support to Ukraine, is how we can build very large coalitions, and by large coalitions I mean also north-south coalitions. We've lost in recent years the battle of narratives. We've been accused of double standards. We've had a hard time, gaining a large enough number of states when it comes to UN resolutions in support of Ukraine and condemning the Russian invasion. And in order to build these large coalitions, I think we have to strike the right balance between being somewhat pragmatic, recognizing that one's suffering in Ukraine or one's suffering in Palestine has to be held in the same standards. But at the same time, we have to be also faithful to our principles, to our values, and try to find a common ground. And there, I think there are opportunities. We can already see that authoritarianism has its own weaknesses embedded in it, that it's backlashing in some countries like in Hungary, that Europeans are, as I mentioned earlier, more and more acute of the Russian threat, that they want to spend on defense for their own agency and not just to please the US. And so I think there is a common ground at the time where everybody is hedging, everybody is looking at their own vulnerabilities and trying to make these coalitions to show that there is an added value in a kind of value-based loyalty, in the kind of solidarity that we've shown with Ukraine, and that we're showing when it comes to France, for example, these days with our partners in the Middle East. And I think with these kinds of coalitions, we can come back to some light.
Thank you. Yeah. What role can journalism play in being the solution?
Provide facts. Facts. It always matters. Again, people have choices when they have facts. But that's the final, I assume that this is my final remark of the panel. So I would like
These
to reflect.
These guys have been very good. They've been holding on very well, our audience. But this will be the final remarks from everybody, yes.
So I would like to comment on whole dark and evil. Russia is not dark. Russia is evil. And darkness settles in when evil wins. We need to make sure that Russia does not win. And a larger point is that human spirit cannot be defeated. Ukraine, look at Ukraine. Ukraine is such a great example of that. It cannot be defeated. Look at Georgia, 500 plus days of nonstop protest where people are demanding freedom of choice. And it's still going on. So evil cannot defeat the human spirit. And to kind of like connect back to the question that you asked, maybe the journalists should do that. Tell people that human spirit cannot be defeated.
I'll second that one, even though I'm an impartial moderator. Iulian, what is the solution?
I remember, I think, a GMF Brussels forum, which was about era of complacency, how we get out of complacency. Now we move to something else. It's kind of dark pessimism. all is crisis, all is wrong, all is bad, everything goes the wrong way, we don't have hope, we don't have alternatives, there's no possibility to survive, kind of defeatism, you know, preparing the public to go the dark side, to consider that it's natural, it goes the way that it should go. So Ukraine didn't embrace his so-called faith. They didn't go and they fight the dark. It's a good example. So why should we always put the dark in front of us? Yes, we need to be conscient, not complacent, but it doesn't mean that we have to look only on the empty part of the glass. So Ukraine is a good example. Slava Ukraina.
Brian, final word to you.
Thank you. I mean, the question is, how do we get out of the darkness? I'm going to start by describing the darkness. The proponents of this gangsterism I described want to create a system in which the strong lord over spheres of influence, right? It's kind of like a global version of the 5 families of the New York Mafia. Right? This family gets Brooklyn, this family gets Queens, this family gets Manhattan. In this situation, they want to be able to spread their kleptocratic networks across borders, just like crime syndicates, unbothered by the rule of law. Presumably, Russia gets Eurasia, China gets Asia, the U.S. gets the Western Hemisphere, I guess. To paraphrase the artist Prince, would be partying like it's 1799 in that world. Right? Is there a way out? There is a way out, and I agree with everybody that's mentioned Ukraine. We have to be like the Ukrainians to defeat darkness, because they are defeating darkness. And what I mean here is we got to innovate. Ukraine has innovated their way toward winning this conflict, I believe. And this requires the democracies of the world that have not been infected by the virus of gangsterism to unite, right? Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney alluded to this in his very important speech in Davos, urging unity among the middle powers. If you add up the GDP of the EU, the UK, Canada, Japan, North Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, they have a combined GDP of roughly 36 trillion US dollars. That is about 25% of global GDP. That is roughly equal to the US. It's nearly twice that of China, and it's 14 times that the size of Russia. If that can be harnessed, and I'm saying this as an American, and it pains me to say this, but I'm saying the free world without America needs to unite, because there has to be a pillar of liberal democracy somewhere. And my loyalties lie with those values more than any tribe that I belong to as a result of the accident of birth, right? So if this potential in the non-US free world can be harnessed, well, since I quoted the Canadian Prime Minister, I'll close by paraphrasing another great Canadian, Neil Young. We all be rocking in the new free world.
I think the theme that has come through from all of you is that Ukraine is really showing us day to day how to come out of the darkness. It was unprompted, but it's what we all feel being here. I really appreciate all your time. Brian, James, Ia, Morgan, Iulian, David, a huge round of applause, please, for our panel. Thank you.